You've been waiting for it, and it's finally here. The Southern California Foreclosure Report is here, and the numbers are finally getting interesting. There's something that you need to be tracking if you're interested in foreclosures in Southern California. Hey there, Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates. We've been helping buyers and sellers make the best decisions in this crazy market. We are going to run through the notices of default, the notices of trustee sale, and those properties going back to the bank, otherwise known as REOs, which stands for real estate owned. We were listing and selling bank-owned homes, and based on these numbers, it may be time to dust off those skills. So if you're ready to dive into the Southern California Foreclosure Report, hit that like button and let's get started. Here we go, diving into the data for the Southern California Foreclosure Report. Here it is, pulled right from Black Knight, where we get our data. We have to do it in the middle of the month, like I mentioned before, because we need to make sure that things are recorded so we can get the most accurate data for the month before. And here we go, notices of default. There is some news to report here. We can see that the numbers are up. Now, what's amazing to see in some of these numbers, they are only like 1 or 2 or 3 away from each other. So I double checked, triple checked. These numbers are accurate, and our email newsletter subscribers will be able to zoom in and play with these. But you can see LA for March, 587 filed, and in April, 585. Let's get those out of the way so you can see there was a drop in Riverside and a little bit of drop in San Bernardino, but the other counties, they stayed consistent. And again, these numbers are so close together. So what does this mean? We are starting to catch up for foreclosures that weren't filed during the moratorium because of COVID. But we're going to put these into context so you can see how these compare to years past. Moving on to the notice of trustee sale. So the second step in the foreclosure process. So we've got 120 days for the notice of default, 90 days to the notice of sale, and then 21 days to the sale. So we can see the numbers for the notice of default are up, but for notice of trustee sale, they're actually down. They're not up dramatically. So those properties are still working through. And as I mentioned in the past, why we have that big surge in the notice of trustee sale back in August, September, that was when the foreclosure moratorium was lifted, and that was low-hanging fruit. That was stuff that had been foreclosed on. The process had been started before COVID. They kicked it into gear when they could again. So that's why we have that surge there. But we're not seeing the properties go through the notice of default into notice of trustee sale yet. But that's why you got to keep watching these videos to track it and see if these are going to make it all the way through the process. And here's context for notices of default. We have to look at April's going back. And you can see that when you compare all the way back to 2015, that we do have a dramatic increase. You can see it in LA. That's a big number. Get LA out of the way. And the other counties, we see that historically, the April 2022 numbers are high as compared to back to 2015. That's because we're finally starting to catch up for foreclosures that didn't happen during COVID. So this isn't necessarily a huge wave, but it is the start of running these properties through the foreclosure process. Now, of course, when we add in years past, we add in 2011, that was a big time for notices of default. And there were 800 in LA, for example. So we are looking like we're close to those numbers back then. I will tell you, our data sunsets around 2011, that if you went back further, you'd see much higher numbers monthly for notices of default. This is actually kind of on the tail end, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we look at notices of sale at these numbers historically. Massive, massive numbers. And the notice of trustee sale, we can see these numbers aren't high. The properties are still working through the notices of default, and the ones that are in the notice of trustee sale phase are still relatively low. We definitely had higher times in 2015, 2016. So let's put this into context. And here's our context. I wasn't kidding. You can see massive number of properties under notice of trustee sale back in 2011 in April. And I'll get LA out of the way so you can see same thing for these other counties. Just huge, huge numbers of properties that were in the notice of trustee sale phase in April of 2011. And ultimately, you'll see, we'll put the bank-owned homes into context as well, that a lot of these kicked out and became REOs, became bank-owned homes, and then ultimately came to the market. And here we are at the real estate-owned, the bank-owned properties. You can see the numbers are just minuscule for the Southern California Foreclosure Report for April of 2022. The properties aren't through the foreclosure process yet, so they're still going into the notice of default phase, and they may end up kicking out to the end to the REO phase. But here's the major difference we had, and we'll put this into context. It goes back to 2012. You can see massive number of properties that were real estate owned. And back then in 2012, actually April of 2012, the market was just turning and it was starting to become a good market again. But these properties were foreclosed on essentially just as that was happening. So those were folks that did not have equity, whereas today, the people going through the foreclosure process, most of them have equity. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be foreclosed on. You can be foreclosed on if you have equity. But what can happen is if you get a notice of default or you get the notice of trustee sale, you can go ahead and sell and actually walk away with money. You don't have to go through foreclosure. Back in 2010, 11, 12, you would go through foreclosure because there was no other way to get rid of your property unless you were working on a short sale, and that had its challenges as well. So this puts it into perspective for you as to where we are with foreclosures right now. So as you can see in the data, it is time to start tracking those numbers. It's early on in the notice of default stage. You're going to want to see if they make it through and ultimately end up on the market as bank-owned or even third-party sales. So of course, you need to subscribe to our channel and our free weekly email newsletters to stay up to date on the foreclosure data. But also we have a link below so that you can subscribe to all the homes that are in pre-foreclosure or foreclosure in Southern California. We have a link so you'll be notified immediately when those are listed. And additionally, we have a link to foreclosure.com where you'll be able to track properties before they hit the market. We've also experienced a recent surge in the popularity of our video on SB 1079, which is California's new law related to trustee sales and being able to buy after trustee sale if you're an eligible bidder. So make sure you check out this link, and of course expect more content to come on the developing story about foreclosures in this housing market. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we want to hear from you.